Alright, welcome everyone to the second lecture in the Construct series. The next lecture will be Nader Tarani in 2 weeks' time with his talk, Catalytic Structures Transform Types. So I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Zago here to lecture tonight. Andrew's a professor at sci-arc in Los Angeles, at other school, where he coordinates the visual studies program, and he's also a clinical professor at the University of Illinois Chicago, so we're conveniently catching him between two poles. He is also the principal and founder of Zago Architecture based in LA. His projects and texts have been widely published. He's also curated or participated in a number of important exhibitions, including his participation in the MoMA Foreclosed show that Ryan Holmark talked to us about last semester, and also the provocatively titled Confederacy of Heretics, an exhibit that Andrew co-curated at the Architecture Gallery in Venice, California. I first met Andrew when I was on reviews at Michigan a long time ago, and he took a group of us afterwards to his office, which was at the top of a pretty much abandoned office tower in downtown Detroit. He had a whole floor up there, essentially, right? And it's not big, but it was a whole floor. It was the top floor, even, of this tower. And this was, we could see the entire city below. And this was ages before Detroit filed for bankruptcy, but already then this nighttime vision was both alluring and appalling. It was a city of possibility, but also a city that was scarred by the failures of late modern urban capitalism. Both the promise and the lessons from this context have deeply marked Andrew's work and thought. I admire Andrew for having a remarkable breadth of production. He could lecture tonight about representation, about housing, about Rome, about Detroit, about contemporary art, about working in Yamasaki's office in Detroit, about many things. You've seen that already if you've looked at his work, and I'm sure we'll see some of those threads in tonight's lecture. But I admire him more for the fact that across this breadth, there's a consistency that isn't, I would say, a single project per se, but rather a consistent tone. I know that this tone will emerge from the architectural projects that Andrew will present tonight, but I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about two instances when I edited Andrew. One a project and one a text that already reveal that tone. So the first was a project for the cover of Assemblage 39. So Andrew did the cover, this was the cover and also the inside flyleaf of Assemblage 39, which was in 1999, it was a while ago. We're revealing our ages. And it's a series of photographs that are taken from a whole series of 120 photographs of bank buildings in Detroit. So it documents the corner bank building type that were built all over Detroit between 1920 and 1940. And these photographs show the individual autonomous blocks, these compact, elegant temples that are now evacuated of their symbolism to the solidity of capital and have been turned into everything from a JT Smart to the echoes of Revelation New Divinities Church. So it documents essentially what all of these have been turned into. This documentary photography project, which dates from 1999, reveals Andrew's interest in objecthood, infrastructure, both the abstract infrastructure of finance, but also the concrete infrastructure of this building type. It also shows his interest in representation, symbolism, and facade. These are themes that I think are consistent in his work. The second instance was Andrew's piece, Real What, which was in log 5, where he took on the challenge of the term authenticity in architecture and managed to avoid all whiffs of Heideggerian essentialism to put on the table a call for a post-ironic authenticity. The key to a post-ironic practice is, Andrew wrote, to re-examine the nature and potential of technique, not to jettison it, but to loosen it from its traditional expressions in media. Again, in this piece, then, Andrew focused on the intersection of architecture and culture with an attention to architecture's built specificities, but also its resonance, its representation, and its media. Both of these examples underscore Andrew's understanding of architecture's disciplinary terrain and the ease with which he moves from that specific territory to the larger geographies of history and culture. As we were discussing in the blocking talk earlier, it's because he's rigorous in how he carves each project out of these overlapping territories that he's able to project newness, innovations that come from the tweaking of rigor, or as Sasha called it, rendering that rigor oblique. This construction of the rigorous oblique is exactly why I'm so happy to have Andrew join us this evening. And so it's with anything but marginal interest that I welcome Andrew and look forward to hearing his lecture entitled Of Marginal Interest. Thank you.
Oh, there it goes. Does it work now? Yeah. Great. I can see loudly now.
You like that here?
Great. Thank you so much. Honestly, sir, this is really a treat to be invited out here. And we were having a discussion with a handful of students and Sarah right before. What's a Brock? Oh, I see. It's a little like a brunch, a little like a Brock. We were here, I forgot all the discussion when we were talking about schools and things that are happening here versus happening at sci-arc and at UIC. And I just realized, there's lots and lots of schools of architecture, and there's nothing that says any school has the right to be interesting and important or part of the kinds of discourse that I cherish and I think is supported here. That's really something that has to be constructed, and it is within the larger set of schools as they in North America. It's a surprisingly small subset. You could be at some fairly fancy schools sitting at pieces projects. There's one of these shows that shall remain nameless except it's on the Charles River. Maybe it's further from down the hall. Where you just, none of that, there's a shocking lack of discourse at school. So I appreciate it, and when I'm here, I know in many ways, I think, and Sarah a really fascinating talk at sci-arc just recently. The schools, no doubt, are very different. Maybe there'd be a different kind of map between here and UIC, which was run by Bob Sommel, who's an occasional co-conspirator with Sarah. But it's, I just wanted to say it's sort of in that spirit, and so I try to focus my talk not so much on just the general audience, but on, let's say, to an audience that is involved in thinking through what are the current questions of the discipline of architecture. So, marginal interest. This is the result of Sarah asking for a title when I was in the middle of a 2-week bout of a terrible flu, and in my delirium, I thought, it's not entirely, it's not a random, it's not a reflection of this not being interesting. It really grew out of some things I was doing at the time with teaching, revisiting some questions of the so-called sectional object and sectional space when you defer architecture, the inhabiting of architecture out to the periphery and occupy the privileged center of any sort of geometry or form. But also I think it had a little bit to do with some of the things we'll talk about in looking at the work that I've done in the last few years, and once you do a lecture, you have an occasion to go back and review that, realizing, very often I would try to look at things that seemed to hold very little promise or be that would have a very dubious position within architecture and see whether that might, be exactly the thing that one works on. So, and then I also use it as an occasion to make this. The talk was interesting that we were just having with the students. And the point I made was that if I had made this talk 3 years ago, it would have been very different. We've been doing some soul searching, I think, with the graduate thesis program at sci-arc, a program that I've been involved with fairly heavily, and one that I think has been producing some quite important work in recent years, trying to make sense of why that was, and also what's going to happen next, because it seemed like a certain period was over, And whenever I find myself facing these kinds of personal dilemmas, I always assume it's a discipline-wide problem, and I project accordingly and try to go from there. So in that spirit, I realized not only was there a moment that was passing in terms of, let's say, recent history, there was a moment of very productive and quite free-wheeling speculation, and I think to a certain degree that period is closed or coming to a close. So instead, the working title is what Zago architecture did during the recession. Because I realized that this period coincided both my teaching and putting this lecture together. I realized, look, shit, this is also the case here. If I look at the work, really, my recessionary work really falls into a lot of the same category. We all had a lot of time on our hands. We were all spending more time at school than is probably healthy, and using it as a little petri dish to run all sorts of strange experiments with the students as willing co-conspirators, I must say. And I realized now in retrospect the same thing was happening in my practice. So it's there's a number of themes that are going to, or I don't know if themes is the right word, topics and interests and obsessions that are going to run through the projects that I'm going to show this evening. And I'll try to keep it short. The main point is that I have the ability to develop very complicated rationales tying together all of my interests. I won't bore you with all of those. I think they're important, but they're lengthy and maybe a little bit in drive. But I want to just give you a sense that it's a strange, even by my own reckoning, it's a little bit of a strange combination of items, and made me think that now that hopefully, tentatively, the recession is over, I don't have to come up with any new topics again for the rest of my life. I can just work on these. So what would these be? This is a short list, which with just some funny names for them. It's a wrap, which is looking at an interest in working on the geometry of the exterior of the building. It's a classic problem of subdivisions and geometries and projections out. It's usually thought of as a kind of three-dimensional problem. And I was very interested in the sort of bad wrapping paper problem. In other words, that you can't take a two-dimensional geometry and ever make it work consistently across a three-dimensional object. And so rather than trying to hide that, I wanted to see what would happen if one would have an unhealthy focus on some of those problems and do that. I fold, which has to do with, let's say, you have origami, which is quite elegant. You have the complex theories of Rene Tom. I was interested in just simple crude creasing. What happens when that becomes enacted onto some very bright material, thick and unyielding? So when you take a two-dimensional problem and instead bring it into a three-dimensional condition, it's a little study from a project that I'll be showing you towards the end of the talk. And then this one, which we were talking about with the chat with the students, this is actually the title of a seminar I'm teaching right now, and there's also the working title of an essay that I'm working on from New Forms of Representation to New Forms. I've been interested for a long time in the nature of architectural drawing, and this is just a digression for a minute, because this is important. It doesn't show up so much in the work, so I'll just talk about this one a little bit. Not only in terms of architectural drawing, but I started realizing there's a distinction between what I call drawings and pictures. A lot of this was a reaction to going to sci-arc maybe 5 or 6 years ago to thesis projects, and all you would see is huge perspectival renderings of projects and very little else. And I said, well, this is odd. And a progressive school invests itself so heavily in a 500-year-old representation technique, there ought to be something else. I got interested in the dismantling of that and making a clear distinction between what I was calling drawings. Let's say Piranesi, the Planet Pompomarzio drawing, is used as Rome, pictures. Pictures are important, you show them to people, but it's really drawings that architects work on. I started realizing there was a transition from drawings to pictures. If you think about perspective, which at one point was quite a radical, mathematization of space, to it eventually becoming, kind of hackneyed go-to, that you can find this kind of process. And that representation, in fact, isn't just perspective, it has its own history, its own development. We started doing a lot of experimentations with that. And so these are our films, XYT, Detroit Streets. This is one still from it. It's a huge installation. If you're in Chicago for the AIA convention, it's going to be at the Art Institute. It's about 80 feet across with multiple projectors. These very slow moving tableaus of Detroit streets. But this eventually goes into something like this, which is taking actually a study of Giuseppe Tirani's Sandelia chair from the Casa del Fascio, and applying some of the same techniques, which I won't go into the description of it right now. It's a strange technique, and there now it was not just a form of representing it, but actually the lens through which it was represented changed the chair itself. In other words, the Tirani chair was not harmed in the making of this film. It's simply the film itself began to change it. So it seemed like there was a way to go then from forms of representation to forms itself. And where it sort of left out of the movie screen, let's say, or out of the two-dimensional space, three-dimensional, if you think of film as a four-dimensional space and four-dimensional projection in three-dimensional space, it was thinking about a CAT scan, or the tomograph more generically, which is taking, like a film, you take a series of stills through something that is a series of sections. It would be like this would be a long discussion, but the idea was that what if you did the same thing, but where the object was moving while the CAT scan was underway. And so in this, what you do is you can see a whole series of sections actually cut through a rotating cube, so that these techniques that we work out as a form of representation here, and this is a film, it's a three-dimensional digital model that one could 3D print or whatever you wanted to do it. That this was a kind of let's say tangible three-dimensional product of our representational interest. What's that thing? A whole category of things that are kind of like projects where you at least suspect that you are looking at something. Like, is it a picture of something? Is that a human body? Is it a duck? Is that something? So the idea of a kind of representation or a kind of legibility, which to my mind has always been like it would be the third rail of architecture. I spent my time in graduate school and thereafter being a firm enemy of postmodernism. But to actually, maybe in the wake of, say, the Jeff Koons Celebration series, the Puppy Dog, which is so, its legibility, oddly enough, and the triviality of that legibility lets you simply surpass that, and it becomes a new kind of abstraction. So there's a whole series of things that we've been playing with regarding, is that actually something I see? And here, like when we're working on a chair, so you have Bob Big's boy, you throw a lot of technology at it and 3D scanning. You end up with a tentative frame of a chair. You don't see Bob Big boy exactly, but in the right light, maybe. So, not it is this would actually be probably an interesting discussion in part semantics, but in part I think not in a kind of response to Sarah's lecture at sci-arc, which is, by the way, it's all online, so you guys can catch it. It's great. Hear what she says about behind back. This goes really, this goes back further to things back in when I had my old practice, Oxford, and even with Jeff Kipnis, looking at weak form. The whole idea that there has been a struggle not only in our practice, but I would argue in a number of other practices, or a number of instances in practices, where there's an attempt to make a building that is not an object. And, and I know we've gone through, and in my practice, we've gone through and kind of systematically identify qualities of objectness and try to figure out how to break them down. I think in weak form, Jeff's description of it was a disciplined relaxation of geometry. But we've gone into other things with that as well, and I might be able to talk about it. Accident is a little bit standalone, but has influenced a couple of projects and continues to be a way of that we think about it, what happens in that zone between, let's say, that an area that is neither clearly top down or bottom up. Misregistration. This would be similar to not it in that it's there is a strange. It's not strange. It is so common as to usually be outside of notice that in architecture, materiality and geometry tend to coincide with one another. The Pirelli tile ends where the geometry breaks, and you stop painting at a certain point. The degree of coincidence of these two things, once you start noticing it, is virtually everywhere. So sometimes we try to go through and do a relaxation of boundaries and the slipping between materials and geometry. So this will go into our first project, which really has a lot to do with that last topic. And I could go on and on with that, about the infusion and the involute, and we come up with names for them, one of it. So Property with Properties is the name of our project for the foreclosed rehousing the American Dream project and exhibition that Ryan Martin organized together with Mary Birdell, sorry. I just found this artist Barry McGee last night, and Barry Birdell, sorry. The wonderful Barry Birdell, in fact, he's terrific. I got to know both of them through that. We were the firm asked to do a project in California. It was actually quite a relief that we thought for sure we were just being tagged to do a Detroit thing. They didn't look at Detroit, which I think was wise. And so we were looking instead of Rialto, California, which is, for those of you who know it or don't know, it's way out in the Inland Empire near San Bernardino, this vast stretch of flat land that goes east from Los Angeles for about 60 miles. It's big intermodal transit stations where things go from train cars to warehouses that you ship all around the country, 3 million square foot warehouses. I mean, it's amazing. And there's a lot of new development going there. It was deeply impacted by the recession and the foreclosure crisis. So I suppose I'll start what I did during the recession with the recession project. So this was, Ryan may have talked about this, this was the mantra. He had done an entire study with the Buell Center at Columbia about this foreclosure and about various cities. That formed the kind of beginning document for our project. And what he said in that, and he said it many times during the course of the workshop and project, was this: change the dream, you change the city. In other words, you have an American dream. That American dream is engendered by and also puts into play a whole series of finances, ways of laying out land infrastructure, house typologies, etc. So he's basically saying that the policy and politics of it then give the shape of the city. That if you want to change the form of the city, you change the dream and then the reflection of it will change. Boy, I couldn't have said it more differently if I wanted to. And I always go back to Winston Churchill, who said, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. So I believe in the efficacy of architectural form. In other words, that however indistinct and however difficult it is to put our finger on what that thing architecture does, we have not yet found that Higgs boson particle, that can reliably give us the Bilbao effect or the whatever effect. But I think we're in this field and we struggle mightily because at some level I think we need to believe this. And so it isn't about architecture being a reflection of the politics and the aspirations. Well, we turned it right around and said with our project, we think if you change the city, then you can actually make new dreams. That the form itself of the architecture can change the imagination. It's not that architecture is an instantiation of that thing. So this is it, and it's an enormous development, nestled right against the San Bernardino Mountains, 2,400 homes and a few 100,000 square feet of commercial center. That's the 15th freeway as it branches up on its way to Las Vegas. And this has been approved, and it got completely the infrastructure laid out, all the grading done. There's a drop, so each parcel is about a foot lower than the next. They began constructing it, and then the thing basically had a heart attack. And they had there's a very complicated system of financing and timing of that financing to make these things work. I learned quite a bit about that. And it's all made about it. It's all based on it getting from point A to point B to point C. Once that's interrupted, especially in such a huge project, they have big problems. I should mention, if you fly over coming into LA, you can see this pretty clearly. It would have completely ruined the story. Right now, it seems to be fine. They nearly finished it. The whole story during the time was, this is a disaster. What are they going to do? So this is also why this is happening. So now it's after the recession. This just gives you an idea. You can see that this is point. Oh, this is advancing. Those are going to. Yeah. So here's LA, here's the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, then you go down here to the Chocolate Valley and Palm Springs, but you see right up against the homes there. And so this is it. There's a few model homes, and the wilderness is right there. I mean, it's quite striking. And this is a California and a Southwest phenomenon where eventually it's not like in the Midwest or maybe even around here where suburban developments are replacing farms. This is just going out to the desert and semi-desert wilderness, and you're getting mountain lions coming into foreclosed homes and things like that. So this is it. You just see the whole thing. That aerial photograph I showed you was all platted out like this. And there's proximity to the mountains. So the title itself, A Property with Properties, that was actually coined by Bob Stoll, who was kind of our consultant, a sort of theory and idea consultant on the project. And this was the core idea, that when you design one of these subdivisions, there's a whole series of qualities that are put into place and all be assigned according to a series of set lines. Ownership, economy, ecology, transportation, infrastructure, etc. So it works out, I mean, something like this, right? So you have, I don't know if you can read that. Mine, yours, private lawn, public paved, inside, outside, building, landscape. And what we imagined was, you have a certain type of financing for all the homes, a certain kind of size for all the homes. You had to move in, you had to buy that. You had to put wilderness out there, lawns in here. This is how the formula works, and that was the thing that was falling apart. And we wanted to see what would be the effects if we started to have a certain ambiguity about it. One of the interesting things about misregistration, it's not a collage. You don't lose the legibility of the original thing. You maintain it. You simply loosen it at the edges. So I mean, our proposal, which I think was frankly quite different than I think all of the other colleagues working in other cities looked at suburbs as a problem. Why can't you be more like a city? And everyone's solution seemed to be apartment blocks. This was thinking, the suburbs aren't so bad. They have problems. Why don't we just fix the problems? And so this was an idea of working with those problems. There's a complex economic model. We work with David Bergman. He's a great urban financial planner, and he also, as he jokes, is sci-arc's planning department. So we went through a whole scenario of what we were going to do with this project with a minimal amount of federal intervention, which was the fiction of Reinhold. If the Reinvestment Act had been done differently, what could they have done here? That we would have changed some of the basics, not only the geometry of it, but patterns of ownership and land use, etc. I won't go through that. Working with Alex Felsen, an ecologist from Yale, we also worked on a fairly ambitious ecological program for it, not just about sustainable development, but actually about enhancing the ecology. We went through and looked. I should mention this is a classic, of course, for one of these subdivisions is a classic ladders project. There was a whole other discussion of how we didn't turn it into a grid, but we kind of hot-wired some of the streets and cul-de-sacs so that you're constantly on small streets from one after another. And we abandoned the large central collecting artery and turned that instead with some underpasses into a sort of pass-through for wildlife so that, the Tamborino kangaroo rat and the cougars and everything else can go through it. And then on top of that, this was, I've been reading more about this recently. Alex introduced this idea of Pleistocene rewilding, where you looked at the habitat in places like North America, and you realize already, before Europeans arrived, human beings had already changed the habitat, killing off large predators, and it's dependent on that. And you can find their near matches in endangered situations in other places. So the African elephant in response to the mastodon, etc. And there's serious studies about introducing these into the wild. So part of it was also having a study for that. We worked with Arab engineers, in particular Bruce Danziger, and their infrastructure team on the whole infrastructure of it. I won't go into that. We also worked with Bruce, who was a structural engineer, to, these homes are built essentially the same way that homes were built in Southern California 100 years ago, 110 years ago. The basic stud stick construction. So we also revisited that and went with a SIPS panel. For those of you, for a lot of my colleagues know what they are, but there was unrecognized, underutilized structural potential to make them into a kind of semi-monocoque system, which is what we did also. So we kind of did soup to nuts. took the subdivision, we misregistered the whole thing, and so ended up with, I won't go into the details of the misregistration, but we ended up with lots of complicated conditions, including the idea of doubling and tripling the homes. So we ended up in the end with about 1.5 times the homes that we had before, 3,600 homes. But other things happened to them as well. They have a much smaller footprint for 3-story homes instead of 1 and 2-story, and other things happened. So then within that, you can go through and there's different ownership models. Part of it's a land bank, part of it's fee simple. So you could buy a mortgage on this house and own it. Next to it could be a land bank cooperative. And so you're just buying it for a fraction of the cost of this one and don't own the land underneath it. So the idea is that you can move into this in many different stages in your life, and even as the wheel of fortune spins, you can move from one kind of property to another. If it's a duplex, you can move into the smaller unit and rent out the larger unit, or vice versa. Different ways in which paths and paving go through it, and then the varying surfaces that go in there. And here you see with we looked at a lot of zoo sections, to figure out what you needed to keep elephants out from the general population and things like that. It's like, the guys from Yale, to me it's like, big technical papers on introducing, wild animals. So then with the house itself, a few diagrams, maybe a little dark. Looking at the top one would be the typical suburban house. The bottom one would be the kind of California mid-century modern, the idea that, or even a Schindler house, where the idea that the exterior, your house unfolds and part of your private space is on the exterior. We imagined a different kind of life and a different kind of community here. And so we talk about the involute, where instead of that, we're bringing actually the public space, or at least a feeling of the exterior space into the building rather than privatizing the exterior. Here's our little diagram of the involution study model. The misregistration to allow not only what we did on the ground, but also the buildings themselves to take on some of this difficult distinction. You see our experiments with the cheese box. They're both just rectangular solids, but one has its surface slipped off of it, and then reconfigured. It doesn't change the geometry; it just changes the surface. So here's some other studies with various kinds of house forms. You see the landscape comes onto the building goes onto the landscape, etc. And then finally, the space. These houses, like monopoly houses, they tend to prioritize the space of the house, and the side yards become uninhabitable. We inflect the form so that the space between it in a kind of Roman Baroque form. You get the space between them having a kind of privilege over the form of the house itself. And study models. In early passages where these things would, the misregistration became a perforated pattern over the building and would add a certain interest. So these are studies for the second skin on the buildings. And right as the thing is published, as the thing is put into the museum, product brings out, so this is one of our axiometric of one of our buildings, product comes out with this line. That's great, they see. Whoever would want to buy that outfit would want to buy one of these houses. So there is the overall site with all of the houses misregistered. So what happens as these things start to move and flow past each other, you still get a lot of individual homes, but you also get a whole number of different forms of duplexes, and in some places even strings of townhomes. So here's a site model of a portion of it, and you can see here where the single homes, the double homes off to the right-hand side there in the lower corner. You can see some of the townhouses as well. This is a really tricky model. You see how it's painted? It's misregistered painted. Now it turns out, like if we wanted to paint the buildings magenta and the ground green, this took probably like 20 times longer. Just like, there's a reason why the flooring stops there instead of slightly going past. So anyway, I learned my lesson. I think you can see, it looks like there's something wrong with the photograph, but it's actually well painted. You can see it there. And so there's the typologies of the different kinds of homes. And to show the full sheet of this, this was an interesting discussion with Harry Cobb. saying, people just buy a house they like from Sears and Roebuck catalogs, so this would be something like that. So we actually, the full pages, we modeled it exactly on the advertisement pages for the Sears and Roebuck houses. They give it a name, a model number, so-and-so, and show you the plans underneath it. So this is a single home, this is one form of duplex. What I meant to show in the plans is when the two duplexes come together, the courtyard opens up, and the two invalids both face into it, so it's a way for the two units to have a kind of community. And really, the diagram came from Jose Overy's Miller House, a great book that just came out with 3 generations of the family that all overlook this one common space, and then the townhome studies there. Oh, you see a little bit there, the shared lots. And this is this is a model of a few of the homes, and the building there. So that's the animal separation, and the cage building is actually for the introduction of some exotic birds and study them to see whether they can be released in the wild. Here you're looking at a courtyard. See how it slips onto the ground there. See a little section there, but I have, there you see how the two invalids face each other. I do have, I typically just embed the films, but this one's just slightly tricky, so just give me 1 second. See one thing I'm going to pull up on this. So this goes, and this was displayed on a large monitor, high definition monitor, like a 50 or 70 inch, vertically mounted at MoMA. This really took the place of our perspective. So this goes back to what I was talking about before, and going from those Detroit films, which were, they were key in that they go beyond, say, Boucher's Every Building on Sunset Strip, which is a panorama without a privileged point of view, and turns that into a continuous thing. This does the same thing, but it really comes out in axonometric rather than in perspective. And so we thought that this would convey a sense of what the life in the city was. And in fact, there's Jose Overy with the white hair there. There are a few cameos in this. And a lot of sci-arc faculty, and there's people in here. Hot shows up a few times. That's his baby multiplied 7 times. That's Ben Nicholson, all the way to the back, the peculiar British guy taking photographs of the elephant. So then it was called, A Day in the Life of Rialto, of Rosina Ranch. The discussion came up, I remember this was Reinhold talking about all of these. And so you're using a lot of axonometrics. This is kind of modernist, talking about Herbert Ayer, talking about Peter Eisenman. And I started thinking about it, well, actually, these are based on not so much axonometrics as isometrics, looking at Persian miniatures and the kind of geometry of Persian miniatures and this strange coordination between the hexagonal patterns and the way depth is represented. So I was arguing that you could make another line so it wasn't really about analytic, the axonometric as an analytic, but rather another tradition that would run, say, from Persian miniatures to Tony Smith's Smoke, if any of you know that, which is in LACMA, to maybe Hayek's Diamond House project. So I was arguing that I proclaimed suddenly that there's 2 lines. There is axonometric, literal, and phenomenal. This is actually, this project is, there's Jeff sweeping. Jeff, there's the elephant. So this is the phenomenal axonometric. And you can see that it shifts from a 30 degree in one direction to a 90 degree to a 30 degree in the other. So somewhere between the Detroit films and that rotating cube, and this is the last thing on this, we'll go to the next problem. And the rotating film and the rotating cube is something like this. Then this gets into just speculative territory, I suppose. This hasn't really materialized itself as a project yet, but I started working on these things. This goes back to, is that something that one sees or is it something that one doesn't see? We wanted to see the kind of limits of legibility. And these are a series of studies that I started really working with boxes and flattening them, cutting them up into a grid, and then not leaving them, but actually putting them together in a tile. So, if you take 4 boxes, which is what you do, and you put them together, it ends up being as big as all 4 of the boxes put together. It's not woven into one thing, if that makes sense. And then up close, they're all different, and you see, because some of them are different thicknesses and different, like this one, for instance, there's foil paper, there's some stuff that's white matte, other stuff that's glossy, so there's a kind of three-dimensionality to it. Haven't quite figured out what this is, but this particular study we call elevation studies. It's an interesting discussion about, we do things that sometimes look suspiciously art-like. I try to always make sure that I call them architectural studies. Sometimes you know what project you're going for, other times it's just waiting to find what project it is, and so they're elevation studies. This is 9 box, this is huge. We're trying some things, putting them on, facade studies. The funny thing is, you see like buildings in LA with giant movie stickers put on them. You could actually do this very easily. Here's one, and then this is not a this is another film. It's a small piece that you would just have on a vertical monitor. And so this one is digital, and obviously not physical. And there's 4 boxes in each still, and then the next still, one of the 4 boxes switches for another one, then the second one, then the third one, and the fourth one. So every 4 frames, you've got a whole new set. And it just keeps going like that, and eventually you get back to the first one, and it just shows us a loop. So if any of you want to buy one of these, you just have it on your wall, and it's constantly soothing. Occasionally you'll see Tony the Tiger. But it should always be like, wait, was that Tony the Tiger? Then when you think it is, it sort of disappears. Soothing. And then with the other fold projects, just in interest in, you saw that some of the MoMA studies, we had a chance to do a little permanent installation at Kyoto Seikai University. This is one of the studies for it. And then, so these, I'm just showing these because this is the kinds of stuff we were looking at. Getting in way too close on both comic books, setting the scanner up to 11. And so this is it. We mounted it on Olivon panels, gigantic stickers, and then a gold foil on the other, and then installed it into this stairwell. It's funny, it is like folded paper, like it's not flat, there's 2 or 3 levels of the thing. You know what I mean? As if you fold this slightly thick paper. And so this is the Confederacy of Heretics, which is Todd Gannon's provocative title. I will mention. So what this was, it was in the sci-arc gallery, but the original one was a thing called the Architecture Gallery, a pop-up gallery that Tom Main did in the fall of 1979. So this is it. There was 9 lectures. There was nine firms. There were 10 lectures. An introductory one and closing one by Coy Howard. And then this is Eugene Tupper, Roland Coates, Fred Fisher, Frank Dinster, Frank Gehry, Peter de Bretteville, Morphosis, which was Tom and Michael, Studio Works, which was Craig Hodges and Bob Pangurian, Eric Moss, and then Coy Howard giving a conclusion. I'll bet you were there. Were you there then? Did you at all? You saw a few. So they're all online. You can watch them all. It's amazing. Sci-arc has been doing video archiving since like the mid-70s, and then the Getty has this whole thing now where they have them all. So I went through this, and in fact, I'm sure they were. Frank was showing, Gary was showing projects that he worked on, and it was sort of fascinating. It was a big deal. 10 one-week shows in Still Gallery. Every week, whoever was exhibiting would give a lecture at sci-arc, and every week the architecture critic of the LA Times would write a piece on it. quite a coup. Tom Hanks put it together because it's like an early glimmer of Tom's ambitions after already having started sci-arc and had just come back from getting Amorphosis and had just come back from getting his master's at the GSD, rejoined the faculty. Ray Cappy and Shelley were on vacation and he organized this. You talk to Shelley Cappy, this is like 1979, it's like, that Tom Hanks wasn't supposed to do that, you know, like he knew, like she's still like stewing over this. It's funny. I won't go into the show so much. I curated it, you and Brenda, Tatiana, and I curated it. Those two especially had a lot to do with putting the book together. I had probably more to do with the selection of the work in the gallery. My first curation project, and also our first chance at doing an exhibition design. So there was a tie between the two, and this goes to some of the geometry questions we were talking about. We did it necessarily through a modern lens. We didn't. I think Sylvia Laven's show was much more generous for the same, very much the same period, more or less. It was broader and probably much more generous and sympathetic to the broad range of things. I was considerably less sympathetic to most of the work that was being shown in these things. So we really went through and said, well, this is like juvenilia of a lot of things that didn't pan out. There's a few things that probably did. Let's look at it from a contemporary point of view and not say what was important then, but what's important, what of it would be important now. One thing that I thought was I saw this from Marginal, is you started to see increasingly complex projections and geometric pieces. So we didn't want to do the tropes of the plywood and the studs and the loose construction. We thought that there was if you looked at it kind of analytically in terms of this geometry, that there's any number of times that you can find this in the lecture, and Eric's talking about it, Frank certainly is talking about it, and others. You can sort of trace this through. So we thought there was a kind of history to this. The first one was parallel projection. This was all the rage, like the axonometric, right? So you just project something straight back. This was very big on the East Coast, not only with the 5 architects, but the person who was very influential for a lot of these people was James Sterling. The project that wasn't involved, but also stands as a kind of symbol of this, is Pelley's Pacific Design Center. Morphosis at the time, they had projects then that were very much influenced by James Sterling and that kind of logic of the axonometric. You see here Peter de Gretschville working with Michael Rotundi. Again, there's a kind of, I'm just calling the logic of the moment of an axonometric. One of the most interesting of that bunch is the first version of the Southside Settlement in Columbus, Ohio by Studio Works. This won a PA award. It was very, very influential. And I think it's a little more radical. Actually, this has never been seen before. It's in the door of Robert Van Buren's Marianne Burkhalter and SUNY, quite a well-known Swiss firm. She had just finished doing all of these collages for Super Studio. Shows up in New York doing some research at Princeton and wanted to help on this project that was happening here. So she made all of these collages that they never used. I thought they were like terrific. And then perspective, and at this point, perspective, this is basically postmodernism. And it was cast in the show decidedly as a retrograde motion. And in fact, my subtitle for it was a heredity of confections. And so perspective was, so they're reintroducing a kind of classicism into it. So it wasn't necessarily that the drawings were in perspective, but I called it perspective, Pantone, perspective, Prismacolors, and placemaking. The second, and you hear the lecture, Robert and Craig talk about this, where Robert and Craig do the first phase. They're giving their lecture in 1979. The project dies. It comes back. Robert was in Rome at the American Academy. Craig's telling him, on the phone, we got the project, and Robert says, hold it, we got to change the whole thing. I just discovered place. And so they literally do the second phase, which is the one that's built. It was just torn down recently, I think. It turned out the pile. Everyone's, in all their lectures, and this is all asbestos shingles with more asbestos flooring. So this is apparently was a pile of asbestos. Fred Fisher with his kind of visionary Skokie project. This is Prismacolor stuff. Morphosis, once they got out of, if history stopped in 1979, and I've told Tom this, we would not be talking about Morphosis. Other Eric Moss, Hoyt Howard, Frank, of course, were doing much more progressive work. It was really a few years later. So they were doing a lot of, once they got past Sterling, they went into postmodernism. The next one is plan rotation. This was very big on the East Coast, the grid shift, right? This is the Cornell School, and other ones, right? You can find this in Peter's work, obviously Peter Eisman's work. Didn't really have a lot of traction on the West Coast, so to take something rotated like that and plan, except for morphosis, which did do, I mean, this was a kind of postmodern move. There was quite a few of it happening there. The other one is a little ambiguous, and one that was close to my heart was flat projection, which is actually taking a three-dimensional thing and projecting it onto a flat surface, or taking a flat surface and wrapping it onto a three-dimensional thing. These are actually screenshots from the lecture, so it's hard to be a historian. This is Frank Gehry's model for the World Savings Bank in Burbank, where he takes a perspective of the space and builds it as mullions on the glass, on the front glass. Right? It's a very strange thing to do. Coy Howard making his drawls, which are somewhere between drawings and models. They're three-dimensional, but they're flattened back into a plane. And then morphosis, what they did that was quite unusual, is they made all these fake postage stamps using the novel technology of color Xeroxing. We discovered them. They had also never been shown. They'd both forgotten about it, and we put together a whole display of them. And then Robert and Craig worked with the Southside Settlement using color Xerox and lighter fluid transfer to put like early playing card and Fiorucci stickers onto this. Then the section, now we get into, I think, California territory, the section rotation, crooked construction. Actually, not just doing that, but doing that. We were looking and could find very few examples of it prior to some of the things happening here. You know, Frank Gehry, of course, you know, he looms large over all of this. This is the Wagner House. But also Eric Moss, very early on, so he would show a project like this, the Pinball House, which you think of as a kind of top kind of house. But then in section, he explains how he bought regular trusses and just rotated them. So in section, it actually reveals this whole like string construction put out of whack. The graphic wrap, which is even more, you know, obviously akin to some of the stuff that we were trying. So this is another project that Eric Moss. He was doing work at that time is quite different than the sort of thing that he's known for. But running a checkerboard up as a cut on a building, and then Morphosis doing something similar in a small edition. And then what I call eccentric projection, which is all kinds of stuff. So then it's not necessarily the straight progression, but a series of stranger things start happening. As a precursor, you know, this is the most important project probably shown was Frank Gehry showing his own house. And you know, this ends up in the deconstruction show. So at this point, you know, it lends into something much more dramatic. And we, in fact, included things that happened a few years after these shows, because that's really where a lot of it sort of bore fruit. This is the disclaimer. This is Tommy 6th Street house, which I grew. So this is 1986 already. Eric Moss's Pedal House, where the house, you know, gets like the exploding cigar on the top. Frank Gehry showing a study model for his own house and trying to explain how they couldn't quite figure out how to build this thing. And then he shows these photographs that also hadn't been seen since 1979. Grant Munford shot these photographs of Frank's house when it was new. And we weren't able to borrow anything from Frank at that moment, and we don't have the wherewithal to do it. But we borrowed these and from the gallery, Grant Munford's gallery, and hadn't been seen since then. They hadn't been seen before, since that time, not since we exhibited them. They haven't been seen since. So this is the entrance. We took those postage stamps and turned it into a huge thing. And unlike the one in Kyoto with the Alucobon, these become these big three-dimensional things. You see it there. And then what we did with the main gallery, we had the main gallery and the gallery upstairs. The main gallery, we built two shaped walls. And those walls, the geometry of them sort of follow the progression of those diagrams. So this one had a giant square that was rotated and has some projects of studio works. There is a close. You walk through to the next one. And in this room, there's two walls. One is shaped, you see that little corner up there. The opposite one has a corner down. So this is like an axiometric. So this is like the axiometric room. Those are the Morphosis stamps. There's Coy Howard's drawls. Like a leitmotif running through it are a series of tables with Eric Moss's models on it. In part it's because when he did the exhibition, he built a giant dining table with a white tablecloth across the whole gallery and had place settings with all of his models on it, and the menus were the drawings. So this is a sort of a, you know. And then this is the eccentric projections where, you know, the more eccentric. When you go upstairs then to the library, this is one of those critical joint stickers that would lead you into there. Then this is the sort of the curical moment. It's a fragment of perspective that's built. It's actually sort of leaning as if you just dropped it. And so this is where the et cetera would go. Then we did also, you know, I thought using exposed studs for architecture, we went down a notch, and these tables are made out of 2 pieces of drywall and a knife and construction adhesive, liquid nails. You cut one in half, score it, and bend it into 2 V's. The other one you cut and score and just break it, and then you use construction adhesive, and that's how the tables work. So they were 20 minutes, $20 each table. The overview from up above. You can see those are the 2 walls. This, I'm going to go, I'm probably running a little longer. Should I go? Okay. 2 chairs. I won't go too much into it other than one of the other things we've been doing, we're doing exhibition designs, we're doing curating, we're doing furniture. I always thought, boy, I can't, you know, I always had an anxiety that I wouldn't be an architect if I didn't do chairs. You don't feel that way about couches or cutlery, but chairs somehow. And 20th century, particularly the history of chairs, the important history is largely a history by people that were in Carter or Foley architects. And so we got I've always been interested in the problem of the cantilever chair, starting from 1926 by Mark Stamm and Breuer. Suddenly once Stamm does it, everyone does it. But I always realized that there was different kinds of cantilevers. I call this the Italian cantilever. This is Carlo Buddati from very early in the 20th century. Again, this is the Sondelia chair by Tirani from the Casa del Fascio. And then you get into other strange cantilevers, the forward and back, you know, go backwards on the back. You know, if you compare that to the other ones, you see the difference. Of course, the zigzag chair. The mysterious Ginger Chalabala, a Czech architect and furniture designer, who really got into much more kind of anthropomorphic and contorted forms of chairs and cantilevers. It's quite interesting to me. And so that's one. So the chairs come from 2 lines of thought. One was that. The other one was this, which I think is, you know, we were talking about everything, you know, so interested in Greg Lynn's work. When I saw these, I was shocked and was absolutely fascinated. And I got interested in, so I was interested in the chair problem, I got interested in this figure problem. How much legibility can you bring in with that third rail problem? But we looked at it differently. We thought, okay, how can you reduce the legibility but still maintain some of it? So I looked at a piece by Donald Judd, and then compared that with, so this would be a diagram of it. And then imagine that you take, instead, just highlight what's the fewest lines you could highlight and still read the cube, and then you get Fred Sandback, whose work, frankly, I always thought was far more sophisticated and interesting than Donald Judd's. If you've ever seen them, you actually feel the presence of this geometry, although virtually nothing is there. So we just wondered if it's possible to take, let's say, the toolpath problem from the toy tables and imagine that that itself becomes a kind of arabesque in space. So you can get a kind of full figural, so there's the Rhodey toy version of it. This was a studio I thought where students were working through a project for Detroit using rubber ducks. You kind of see it there and there. So no, it's kind of interesting to dial it down. And when I saw this at the Vitra Museum, a thin black version of Stamm's chair, I thought, well, it's great. I can do the cantilever, the figural arabesque in space meets the cantilever problem and come up with a new one. So we did research on how, you know, lots of, it turns out there's many different categories of cantilever. Lots of them have been tried out. We pretty much know what they are, and we found unexplored territory. So the Italian cantilever, backward and forward. Then this is, you know, the metal version of the Hoffman one. This is interesting, the kind of diving board. It has its problems. That's why you don't see it so often. The whole idea of the cantilever is that you rest back in it. But we got interested in the diving board. You know, the signage of it. So we figured out that you could manipulate these forms in such a way that, let's say, I want a zigzag diagram. You could move the roadies around so that the intersection would more or less be following that zigzag. So we spent a lot of time trying to get control of this technique that we could straddle that line. this is how we depart from the modernist chair. The modernist chair is, the tube itself has a regular radius where it bends, right? And it's consistent diameter. We instead made one that is much more reasonable. It is a constantly changing radius, a spline, and the diameter of the tube is constantly changing. These are some early studies. Long time trying to figure out how the seats work. And this is it. The chair is called, and I have to wait for him to say this properly. Boing! This is a one-to-one. It's actually like laser cut and black masking tape board put together. It's a full-size mock-up. We're making it now. The chair is going to be made. This is Bruce Danziger, one of the top Arab engineers. This is his weekend project. He's working in chairs. So the cushions themselves, we have a fiberglass shell, and then we have a mold that we put expanding foam in with this shell at the bottom, and that'll make that. We haven't quite figured out the upholstering of it yet. And then the chair itself is going to be cast in bronze, and it's right now as we speak at the bronze caster. It's going to be cast in bronze, given a carbon black patina and wax, which is like Rodin. I mean, that's how those are finished, so it's classic. So we made this. It's pretty hard to make just a weird line and split. If you just think about like those qualities of it not doing, there being a radius and it being a different thing. So we had to do these flip molds out of a relatively high density foam. Do these and then put joints together like this, spackle them, sand them down, and then put them into a three-dimensional armature with little hose clamps and a whole kind of XYZ coordinate to put this together in space. This is now what the caster is having his way with it, cutting it up and making the master mold of it. In the course of doing the chair, Bruce at first couldn't model this geometry so well. Can you just do the basic diagram with some straight lines? I can get the calculations, and we'll introduce the curves. And then we'll make little models and see how it feels. We started making these, and we thought, oh, this is the ready-to-wear version. We have the couture, and we'll have the ready-to-wear. And here you see the cantilever. It's the same, basically, which is from the ground, the seat goes backwards and then comes forward as a diving board, while at the same time the arms come backwards and then go back like that to make a seat. So it's a kind of a contortionist. It goes back and through itself. And so one's moving one way while the other's moving the other way. It's a bit of a bobblehead. This chair, on the other hand, because it's got the reverse cantilever from the zigzag chair, this is called the Zag-Zig. Only for that reason, no other. So then, of course, Marginal does his first studies with pipes. So we go to Home Depot, and we did our study with pipes. Testing it was difficult. Even though we had the error calculations, we subjected it to some of those grueling tests that anyone could possibly imagine. It involved applying in with gin and tonics, I think, I don't know what. So there's the Zag-Zig, and this literally, hot off the press. This is the first version. It's a nickel-plated chrome poly steel, 3/4 inches, the kind used for like motorcycle frames, very high strength. So and we just got it back like 2 days ago. They sent me this today from the office with wedge cushion, etc. It's very, very lively. We have a second one now in process with 7/8 inch tubes and a slightly different configuration. This one I think would have this audience in the stand, so I think we need one slightly stiffer than that. Okay, the accident. How about this? We got really interested in accidents, the history of accidents, and that you can find them. They become increasingly atmospheric and strange. The road spill isn't possible until you have automobiles, mass production, hard surfaces, etc. So, in the old days, these are the only kind of accidents you could have. That once you have that, you could suddenly have, the tragic Boston molasses spill of 1909. Do you know what those? Dozens of people were killed. So we came with this diagram. We thought this was the basic theory of the accident, and this really came from seeing Paul Ferrilio's exhibition at the Cartier Foundation in Unknown quantity, where he lays out a kind of philosophy of theory of the accident. What I found in terms of architecture, let's say on the left is a top-down approach, where it's purely organized by an imposed geometry, right? Rock you shall turn into a cube, and I'll hear no more about it, versus the idea of having the naturally self-organizing bottom-up thing on the other side. Self-organized, so it's either one or the other. So that would be it, like the mysterious polyhedron in the back of Durer's Melancholia 1 versus our fascination with the wasp's nest. Just two things, though. It turns out we're interested in the wasp's nest once you can impose the artifice of the section cut, and if you start looking really closely at the Durer, in fact, it's not perfect, right, because it is a rock. So in fact, everything we do is in there, and that more, somewhere there is accidents are sort of where matter behaves badly, and our technological assemblies are to fall apart. So we played this project for Yosu. It was a pavilion for the Yosu World Expo, working again with the aircraft engineers. The whole idea here was that there was a series of columns that would ratchet down ever so slightly with every tide, and also as they ratchet down, they would rotate, each in a different direction. And then there was an entire series of brass rods that went around it. So when the expo would start, it would be like this, and you had a giant fabric enclosure for the interior. They wanted it to have a use after the expo, which these things never do. So we thought, well, this is working with this fellow, David Fletcher, who's a landscape architect, and with Bruce also. So as it goes down, this thing starts moving, and the columns pull down these rods. And so the rods collapse, but in a way that one doesn't exactly know what they are. So the exact form of it is a function of that accident. Then once it's over, we strip off the mechanical equipment and the skins, and the thing continues to pull its way down. It turns out Korea spends a couple of billion a year making artificial reefs off its shore. And so this is what this would become. This would become an artificial reef, and so it would have a use afterwards, just not as a building. Just a side note with accidents are these tables and other pieces of furniture that we've been working on, kind of weird progressions. It's somewhere between, it looks like somewhere between a math problem and hobo art. There's we're actually based on that horrible little wooden box, sort of based on that dimensions. But the whole thing is made out of just recycled lumber. Like studs from the 30s through the wormhole and everything. We pull out the studs, we dye it, and we give it a kind of wax finish. But it's based on a kind of dumb progression, like one that doesn't fit the area that it's moving in, so it kind of crashes and stumbles along. Eventually it breaks into a pattern, but one table is made from these. So then what happens is sometimes, depending on the starting condition, you get different patterns, and before it repeats itself, you can get one table or two tables, 6 or 7. So with these tables, not only is each table unique, but you can order a set and you can put together as a kind of bench or as a coffee table. No two tables in that sequence will be repeated, and no one else will have that sequence. These are very expensive. That's if you're interested. These are now available. This is the cafe version. We've seen modern art in Korea. I will show. This was just because I was talking about the after-week form. Another idea is a form made into most forms, whether it's figures, geometry, are formed entirely from internal geometry projecting out, right? You have bones, it comes out. This has got an axis that comes out. So here's the John Bologna's sculpture. So if we think of objects, so this would be the object question, is the exclamation mark. What we were always interested in, this was the weak form discussion, was the asterisk, right? The provisional thing, like an athlete's record has the asterisk after it. So rather than proclaiming itself in space, it equally absorbs space within it and projects itself alternately. That's a kind of a diagram for weak form. It slips through space the same way the stealth fighter is designed to do relative to radar, right? And so this one instead was saying, what if you, like if you imagine Roman Baroque gone wild, that you form a building entirely out of geometric logics that are outside of itself. And I think you can see some of the projects. I think that first one endeavor on scallop top number, the Philharmonic, and so on as we tried to take a little further as a sculptor. I forgot the fellow's name, but these are all salt licks. He gave these to sheep and they linked them into this form. This is Sugimoto's conceptual forms. a mathematical model called the Keen surface, traditional Korean has. So this project is right by the gate. It's right next to the current U.S. Embassy. A competition we lost. We're supposed to keep the existing building and turn it into a museum of modern Korean history. So these are our studies, our various kind of scale studies. This is one of the pieces. It's all built as a perforated screen around the existing building that needed to stay because it was an early example of cast-in-place concrete. So there it is relative to the gate and the palace complex at the top. It's over there on the side. So if this is a kind of traditional walled compound, we break down that walled compound, that new space, and allow people to pass underneath the building, like that. And then from that back building, you circulate up through it. So this is that faucet folding down. This is the back building. That's how you circulate back through it. And this is the model of the three-dimensional model of the mesh surface, which just cantilevers off the building. See it here. So it was kind of one of these dark museums that didn't need windows, but you can kind of see in the rendering the kind of ghost of the building behind it, and the back is dead flat, and there would be from the street. Taichung, which we did recently, this is going into a different subject of what does it look like, and for this, actually Jeff Kipnis takes some blame. This is our project for Shenzhen, a museum and exhibition all from years ago. I think Kuhn was just finishing up construction on this. But the project may be difficult to see, but it's one giant cantilever that wraps back into itself. It doesn't touch those legs, it comes around from behind. And it was based on looking in part at human contortionists. But it was solid. And after I see other things like Ben Nicholson, I don't know what this is. Anyone? No, that's very interesting. This is Ben Nicholson's project from 1976, Trafalgar Square. The giant building to be built in Trafalgar Square. They had it at Ohio State recently. There's like 80 drawings for this. It's crazy. And so after I saw that, I thought, okay, maybe there's some territory between something that maybe looks a little bit like a contortionist and some guy, kissing himself in the ass. And sure enough, I think there has been, it does creep its way through projects. I know when Jesse and Monica talk about their report project, they never talk about it that way as a figure. Jeff has talked about it as a near figure, and I thought, well, it's more than near. And I just sent this to Jesse recently. And he assured me they're now working on the Pokey building. So then Jeff did the Couple Marginal project. One of the features, and there's a lot of people's projects in there. My Shenzhen project, I can point it out somewhere. It basically unfolds itself, stands up, and starts doing a conga line through the whole project. Those little dancing figures are kind of unfolded versions of mine. So I thought maybe we could go a little further into it. And this is the installation, a fantastic installation Jeff did at sci-arc just recently. So you had the Marginal project outside the same gallery that I was showing you the Getty show in. More interesting work, frankly. So this was our project for Taichung. It was Taichung. This was half a museum and half a library. The master plan of the second city in Taiwan, near the middle of Taiwan. The master plan is an old airport, actually, it was Stan Allen who had done it. And this one didn't work out. That was our first study for it. Rhode Island. I won't go into the detail. The way the plinth and then the thing is more or less stepping off the plinth, so it has an urban edge towards the city, and then it slopes down and becomes part of the garden that runs along behind it. I did this together, by the way, with a young fellow named Jonah Rowan, who's a young colleague at sci-arc. He's one of the founders of this new journal project, terrific guy. And then a complicated skin were some of the off-wrapping things from that you saw in the other projects came back into this. Here often as a kind of rain screen, perforated and bumpy in some places and not in others. It was a competition, so we do a bunch of perspectives for it. Not that it helped. Sound is one of this. Peter Eisen was an insult. I have an insult lecture here. He's crazy. So the thing we're happiest with is the elevations. And this is the last project. Eric, which is a big engineering firm we're talking about. So it's like we keep having these projects. We've gone for our Qs together, we've done competitions together, we've done exhibitions together. None of these have ever turned into a project. I think they just got sick of me, so they just hired me. So they wanted a new office downtown. There are 150, 180 engineers on the west side right here. North, this is, right here, the old sci-arc, and right here, Frank Avery's office. And they need a little downtown kind of pied-à-terre. They have meetings increasingly. Their infrastructure group works with big agencies that are downtown. So they need some nice conference rooms to meet with people. They also, John Phillips, who runs the office, is trying to institute this thing called an activity-based workplace. There's an entirely different description of this project that has to do with trying to give form to the so-called mythical flexible workspace Google environment. This is something like that as a non-territorial workspace. People just come and float in and out of it. And so they thought they would experiment with it here. And if it works, we're going to start slowly creeping it into their main office. But that's what that is. And the other thing they wanted, he said, frankly, he said, we used to have an office years ago by Amorphosis, like 15 years ago. We've been in the Gensler office ever since. The only one people ever talk about in the old office. Can you just do one that people will talk about? Thank you. So just very simple. We built out an IT closet and a kitchen. We changed the orientation here. The big thing was to make one clean room here. And then these are conference rooms. They poured an unbelievable amount of technology into these. But it's a really crummy little building. It's a nondescript building. You walk down a corridor, and there's cheesy little lawyer offices and things. So we thought when you walk into there, it should be as if some strange creature had landed. Like we didn't want to do a nice interior. We wanted to put something in there that would make the interior. This is a recurring theme, maybe, like if you think of those white walls in the gallery project and other kinds of sectional object strategies. So this is just like a raw floor that was clear-coated, a raw ceiling. And then we just introduced a couple of elements. The fold, when I was talking about the thick fold, well, with something like this, what happens if you start not only making a fold thick, but let's say misunderstanding the idea of joinery? We had some things that were quite literally figural, but stripped it down incredibly until everything was a series of bent bars, just bent bars. But the strategy was something like this. So this is the floor plate. In this space, you have these kinds of asterisks that would just give you different places to work and congregate while these tables are working surfaces. This is the back wall where the conference rooms are. Then this is the ceiling. You have this crazy piece we're calling a halo. So it's kind of an unfolded ceiling plan, back elevation. And here you see it sort of built. The geometry of this thing changes, but it makes a kind of precinct where the project begins, and another precinct here, and then everything around it is just kind of clean white space. So from the precinct, we made this geometry, which is that room I showed you, and then at 5-degree angles, just kept rotating it in smaller and smaller. Then we used certain of those lines to make the floor piece, and then other of those lines smaller to make this halo piece, which is both an acoustic piece. It has a main dimmable LED light element, and serves to kind of bring these pieces. These are from the poster, but I'm going to go through this quickly. I just put these all together, a rotated series of axometrics. This is like branding. It's choisi, same. But they look like Richard Auerschwager, the splat chairs that he would build into corners. I mean, we were very interested in that. And here it is. So, and you can see with the halo, but these two creatures, they actually go up past it. And they have like ducks and shit running past them as if we made a mistake, which was very important to us. We try to always make sure it was a little bit like we made a mistake. Here you see the halo done in natural linoleum. There's a clear flint finish. And it's just crap up there, except for this refined halo piece and these pieces sitting in there. And it's interesting. So we took out, it is a bar, like if you took each of those pieces and rotated it back, it would just be a rectangular bar, nothing else. And yet, unbeknownst to the cabinet makers are really incredible. While they were working on it, they dubbed it the Cobra and the Mongoose. And that one mysteriously got called Larry. Somehow, they just thought, they were these like, and then when they installed it, they finished it, they come into the space, they go, oh, we thought this was going to go into a much bigger space. And then these are the same thing. You see, they're just folded, and one color, another color. This is a rich light. It's a 100% recycled paper cast in a phenolic bond. We're going for a gold LEED certification on this. Little outlets and things in the table, but these are, so this is for receptions. A little chaise lounge, breakout area here. You can see it going up. When you enter, this is what you see. We built this. They needed a design. We didn't want it to hang one, so we built it into it. But it's hard to see how we handle these corners, but it is also done kind of dumbly. So these overhangs. We literally, I should say, they're done very literally. And I think, yeah, thank you. I'll tell you, I'm not going to develop any new themes for the rest of my life. At the end of the recession, I just wanted to I'm sort of joking, but that's why I wanted to end on a building project. It's for all of us.
I wonder if you would talk about, I don't know if I have the right term, but the quirk, basically. There's a kind of quirkiness in your work. And what I'm wondering about is the relationship of a quirk relative to the production of something or work and its reception.
Right. You mean like by clients or by?
Well, it may be a client, maybe a public, maybe foreclosed had a certain open-ended audience.
Right.
So, but I'm mostly just interested in how it's generative, and actually you can correct my term.
No.
But how the relationship of a quirk to generation and reception weighs in on what you're doing.
Well, maybe a couple of things. I like to think that a lot of the things that we do in our work is maybe unusual. It wouldn't necessarily be seen in another practice, but that it has, let's say like with the fold, that it builds out of a kind of problem of the discipline. How you handle the corner, how you continue, what is the alternative to the extra map or to, So I think about that and I said, well, okay, this is, I can, within the discipline, I would defend it as being our individual work, but also, I like to think it's a conversation. With Jeff's work, there's been an explicit conversation back and forth, and it's very important. But in terms of its receptions, it's interesting. Probably it's possible that one would have more projects if one had less works. Not entirely sure about that, but I'm not going to buy it. I think it's, Eric project, client loves it on time, within budget, works.
I'm not sure I would agree with that. For example, there are lots of architects who have very particular quirks.
Right.
Hadi,
Right.
Or Gary, whatever. We all have them, actually, arguably. But there are particular ways in which those quirks are used to produce maybe signature. That's harder in your work. Your quirks are more open.
No, we do it, in fact, to make sure we don't have signature. One of my thesis talks last year to students was end of the autographic work. And to do that, I show pre-autographic. I go through me-standard corner details. And I made my list there to know which is which. So I go through like 40 of them, and you can't tell which is which. And then I go through this pre-autographic. It was just as it was working on a problem. It wasn't like maybe we see it. Then I'm showing Zago 40 projects. Here's a city, here's a shoe, here's a bar, here's a convention center. They're interchangeable. And my argument is that. And then I'm saying, we have to. You can't simply work hard and oops, my work all looks the same. You actually have to work against it because of the legacy of the autographic. So in part it's that, and in part it's, as we were talking about it, the chat was I will put forward as a disciplinary possibility that, or maybe even a sort of mandate, that it is important to work through things that, in fact, can undermine some of your best instincts in order to let other possibilities come out. And I think there's been a kind of time for that. I think part of it is this idea of being past this sort of autographic. So the quirkiness is a kind of, it's not like I think of Scarpa as quirky, like everything, it was personal, right? It's not personal, like a lot of the stuff I don't even, in a certain way I don't like it. That's not the point, it's just like, trying to figure out a way around doing that thing that one does. Like I said, I don't think that's a permanent situation, either for not for myself, and I would argue maybe not just generally, but it seems like we were talking about the kind of, not only after the critical, but after the spline euphoria and things like that, and I think there's been a lot of attempt to try to figure out what's next. I would say, let's say after the Dutch treat, after the spline euphoria, after the critical project, and so I think we're in kind of that era now.
Are you deliberately shying away from a project? Because I do think there's a difference between project and tone in your work.
Sure.
There's a consistent tone, and it's
Sure.
work. It's but it's deliberate that you're shying away from a project.
No, I'll tell you, there's been a few things that we've done recently that would make this is kind of a transition point. If I was making this talk a year or so ago, I would be talking around, I was only talking like, it was another seminar, like Attack the Block, which is ways in which one can break down the presenceness of objects. Architecture as object exercises a certain hegemonic control over space and over cities. That can you find something that would systematically loosen those classical object properties? So the weak form, the scalloping, the misregistration. There's a whole series of these that just had to do with, I should say, that the weakening of the object is a strategy, and then all of these are tactics towards that. The figure stuff sort of comes in from a little bit from left field, and I haven't quite absorbed that yet. But if I was to say something about a project, it would probably be that. And obviously, when we're talking about objects, I'm not talking about this as a way of we're not talking about the object haters. We're talking the separation of questions of form from objectness. I mean, form. I've joked that's my religion.
A lot of the work seems to be about releasing tensions in the field. You often describe the work in terms of relaxation or sitting in boundary. So my question is, where do you see those tensions coming from? Where are they produced? Are they historical or are they art?
I think it is. Yeah, it is a production. I mean, Jeff and I have been having a lot of discussions about this. It's funny, like when you're looking at the Taichung project, I think the term Jeff uses is constituencies rather than an audience. That at some point architecture had to try to find what was the audience for architecture. the audience for a network TV show in the 1950s. You couldn't talk about constituencies because there were 3 channels, right? And it's a very different world where people who, you can suddenly open up a kind of freedom for things that architecture hasn't necessarily been good at doing. One of the things that we were joking about is you don't notice that most every building, especially most every tall building, aspires to have really good posture until you see one without it. Then you realize, oh, actually, they are all standing up kind of straight. Like none of them have been drinking. None of them have been. So it is about using that relaxation as a way of opening up territories of sensibility. The sort of politics of empowering those things that seem like they're inappropriate within architecture. This goes back to the question that I gave Mark and Sharon last night, that I think there are certain aspects, sometimes with their project, you suspect there's something inappropriate going on, like the loopy-loo house, and they left here recently, I don't know what it's called, Docks Our House, and other times less. I think the project they're doing here is an incredible project, it's quite beautiful, but it doesn't have that quality to it. So I don't think it's that, I don't think it's so unique. The way I do it, obviously everyone has, as Ron says, their own way, but I do think there is a sense that, this is one of the sense like architecture is really good at tragedy, it's really good at making you be quiet. It's very good at it's very bad at having you misbehave or laugh at it. So that's I think that's true. I think there's something if that's taken as a kind of that serious project, I think there's actually something to cope with that.
So I'm curious, you were talking about how you're trying to move away from the object and towards this form.
Yeah.
But it seems like there is kind of found objectness in all of your work.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the idea of the primitive of found object, whether it's my little pony or it's like the misregistration of
Right.
the existing subdivision.
Right. No, I hadn't thought about that. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I kind of like with that little rotating cube, which is just a diagram. It wasn't the final result was not interesting per se, but the only thing that changes the cube is the technique. So I suppose at some point I think it's not that you work on something that's so interesting, it's actually the technique itself. It's folding this block thing. Maybe that's simply in interest. It's an easier way to allow the working technique to be the registration of what the form is.
Misregistered, you can have something
To register. It's difficult. I don't really start the simple idea of I believe architecture is serious. Like people really think like architecture have a lifestyle or it's like life and death. I think like life and death. It's not funny. It should be abstract. It should make you cry. And I think you got to the point where whenever you do that, actually try to do that by doing that, it simply became either annoying or sort of maudlin. And so perhaps this is it's a wrong detour, but it's not me, it's society.
So with these subversive quality of the work, trying to respond to these normative conditions like perspective, for instance, that you mentioned several times. I wonder if there are other normative or visual conditions that you're reacting against, maybe that are more contemporary.
Maybe I'll try that.
Perhaps there are any other visual conditions or paradigms that you're reacting against that maybe are not 500 years old, but they are more contemporary.
Well, the axionometric, you know, I don't know if reacting against it is the right word. I got interested, a lot of this has to do with sort of teaching in environment. That I always think, like those box meeting collages. I think of that as a kind of a form of representation. I've always believed that the working space of a project is a enormous factor in shaping the nature of that project. So operating in perspective, one has one thing, operating in the model, one has another, particular kind of model, a particular kind of working space, a particular kind of software. And I think that's often not, I think that this was like, let's say, the, Spline euphoria, that you can do anything. Suddenly you can do anything, and it started being that anything seemed to be the same thing over and over. And it was this idea that the tool itself is shouting, and unless you can go and surgically dismantle that and understand it, it's going to actually be driving what the project is. So I guess that's, I don't know if that's exactly an answer to your question, but I think we're going to talk about perspective because it has to do with those films and et cetera, and because, that's the easy one because, you turn on most software and you spend the whole time working on the project in perspective. It's an odd thing. You're not working on a three-dimensional thing, right? Any more than a painting is three-dimensional. It's two-dimensional. It's three-dimensional condition on a two-dimensional surface with, receding dimensions and distance. So it's just, that's an easy one because people assume that's not even there, the problem.
It's not about using all of these workspaces and about activities.
Yeah, it's about being cognizant of them and understanding that, the work. The example I always use, I was working in high school in the 1970s and knowing people in the marching band. And they were really tired of all the old-fashioned marches. They wanted to do like some rock songs, So they get out with like Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water. But they play it, and it would sound exactly, it had nothing to do with the fact that they were playing Deep Purple. They had a certain way of a beat and the instruments and all of this. It always sounded like marching band. So it's kind of like that, Like you don't. It's not just making a decision that you're going to do something else. It's that's where I think that technique is either your friend or your enemy in these kinds of things. I don't know, man. Too abstract.
Is it fair to say that you're saying something like this? If there's new tools, that there's new kinds of accidents that can take place with those tools.
Not as the only thing, but that it's overall.
So I guess I'm wondering if there is a sense that something's happened, which is say misrecognition or improvement, but there's not a very clear sense of what that thing is that's happened. It's hard to basically.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I'm wondering if you think in that accident or that sense of something happening that I think you get in terms of perception of it, is it the tool, do you want the tool to become exposed in that sense, or do you think the tool doesn't get exposed?
I would like it not to be. I think again, like with those joints in the Arab thing, they're so clear they're laughable. It's just a giant thing, and you didn't understand how to do a lap joint in high school shop class. So that part, one could read it. But in another case, I would say no, that wouldn't be the case.
So do you think, is there a particular effect that you want that accident to produce, or is it different each time?
Well, I mean, it's a tricky question because that gets, like I remember I was teaching some class, a visual studies class, a few years ago, right when Greg he published those chairs, he had Stone Lining, saw them for the first time. I like instantly like downloaded them from design, went in class, skipped my lecture, put those up, went through them, went on the chalkboard, and the dry erase wrote NEW. This is it. I don't know what this is, you know. Something new happened, and I just like I live for that, and I try to would hope that I could generate that, but I think it's like I was so happy, like even if it's like I'm gonna say I've known Greg for a long time. He's terrific. Like I'm not interested in his really. I never liked his work. So I do think that this is kind of one of our responsibilities. Is that we do these things not in order to get a particular effect, but actually to engender novel effects. I mean, for me to make a claim of a line of work is not, I try.
It seems like the novel that you're after, they have a certain trait in all of these guys. They try to find a word for sort of aerodynamic or something. Like there's the spinorama. It comes with a certain paradigm in the sense the word constructs a completely self-consistent world picture. Right? Like things work with perspective, right? And things are all the paradigm creates a representation where things have consequences and all branches correctly. And that's quite different, and even just an architectural representation merges everything through like no error in the system. And the kinds of novelties or quirky things that happen, not really accidents, but to me they are marks in a way that will not allow the design to settle.
No, I did. I mean, one thing that one of the first things I always tell my students is to understand the difference between architecture and design. That, design is something you do later on in the process when you can't figure out what bathrooms are going to fit in. But, architecture is not really that at all. It's not. I coordinate visual studies at sci-arc, and I thought the worst thing about it is what they call it, because I think that what we're really teaching is fundamentally not visual. It results in a visual. The idea of that you do this, you do this, you do the other thing, whatever the point might be in my work. And it's actually that process is a loaded and wrong word, but that process of going through that actually brings it into a kind of visual. So we're always, even though sometimes the logic of a project is an internal logic that doesn't really sort of make much sense outside of it, we're obsessive about it. In an error project, there's exactly two kinds of joints, and there's absolutely no deviation from the logic of exactly what happened, and various pieces come together. So once it gets going, then you do kind of unpack the world. It's not. I mean, the only one that was random was that Yosu Pavilion that Prussians, that actually tried to introduce random things, like those tables, we had to work on to get it just right before it wasn't repeating itself soon enough to be able to, it's not like I had a group of interns working on it all summer trying to bring that continuity, projection, progression techniques and stuff. So to get that